The Redemption Inquiry by Michael Diamond. Part 3. Zeitgeists. Chapter 16. A Night at La Huichette door. The tavern, scene of the fracas, strange doings. A gaggle of churchmen and secularists wrangle for the limelight. In the end, only Rav Levi, Gershon and Meister Eckhart keep their wit. The warp and woof of the social fabric permanently frays at the edges. This time, there will be no forgiveness. 3 years ago, 1306, the recent expulsion, I hung on to the inn as my mother had hung on to it in 1282, the last time the Jews were unceremoniously invited to leave Paris. I was just a child. Back then, we were invited to return, wallets in hand. During the current balagan, the French king has wrung every last sou out of the departing Jews, in addition to gobbling up for himself all the outstanding debt collection due from his Christian subjects. Effectively, I have been running La Huichette myself since Tante Hannah of blessed memory ascended to her chamber in the heavens 10 years ago. The name of the inn honors her magical instrument, La Huichette d'Or. The street has borne that name as long as anyone can remember. Maman received intelligence from her constabulary sources that there would be a mass arrest, 100,000 souls, on the day after Tisha B'Av. What bitter irony! The day after our annual fast of mourning for the loss of both holy temples, twice expelled from our ancient native soil, the Holy Land, first by the Babylonians and then by the Romans. Venal King Philip chose the very same date to expel us yet again, this time from the corrupt kingdom of the Gauls. The Jew, as always, the eternal other. In anticipation of the forced exodus, the family quietly pooled its resources and transferred the assets to a distant uncle in Avignon, Rav Levi ben Gershon, a man of undisputed genius. Uncle Levi, in the quiet of his observatory, had single-handedly disproven Ptolemy's model of the geocentric universe simply by making careful measurements of the moon and by quantifying the light of the planets in a pinhole camera. Et voila! No epicycles. Ptolemy is wrong. Unfortunately for the world of science, but fortunately for the preservation of Reb Levi's life in the ambit of the displaced Vatican, nobody was paying attention. Remember Galileo? As soon as Reb Levi secured a small property in Avignon for our family and found a part-time teaching position for my father, my parents and siblings made a stealthy getaway. I, in the meanwhile, create the appearance of having accepted conversion to the Catholic faith, receive the tonsure, and enroll in the Sorbonne. I am deeply ashamed, but it is up to me to keep the inn going to support my family. I am able to keep my dietary restrictions hidden with the help of clandestine shipments of kashered and salted meat. I secretly kasher a second kitchen at the inn for myself. It keeps my hopes alive. My graduation from the Sorbonne enhances the reputation of La Huichette as a meeting place for students, scholars, clerics, and exotic travelers. With the unseen help of the skills acquired from Tante Hannah, the mastery of the golem, the reason my kitchen door is barred upon penalty of dire consequences to the overly curious, I am able to turn out prodigious quantities of food for my esteemed guests. It may not be the most profound use of Tante Hannah's magic, but it keeps the family in sardines and challah while in exile. More than a few fat friars grace my tables for the sheer pleasure of my cuisine. 3 years on, in 1309, The expulsion is still in place, and I grow weary of toadying to the crowd of highbrow chazers, the tamed boors who crowd my chambers. But the family barely ekes out a living in Avignon. My sisters take in sewing and mending, my brothers chop wood, and my poor maman was put to work as a maid in the papal residence. I am heartbroken, but see no alternative solution to fix the fix we are in. Relief from the drudgery comes as a rogue wave of notable foreign scholars washes up on the banks of the Seine in 1309. I can't believe my good fortune that they actually all show up at more or less the same time. The news from other quarters of the globe is endlessly fascinating. If contact among disparate cultures is the source of fertility, of mind, La Huichette d'Or is a veritable mountain of fertilizer, and my wandering people its most ardent shovelers. But the most interesting soiree of the year by far is, as fate would have it, the eve of Tisha B'Av. It's a depressing day to begin with, and I feel that I have reached an all-time personal spiritual nadir. It is during this sordid time in my life that I dub myself with the not-so-affectionate eponym Le Pécheur, the sinner. A simple change from accent aigu to a circumflex would render me the fisher, but alas, we are what we do. I am beginning to wonder whether there is anything other than the most pecuniary purpose to my having stayed behind, put on the appearance of a Catholic scholastic, only to serve trafe, pork sausage, smoked ham, moules, even escargot, to fatuous friars and mendacious priests. I am in choleric humor today, dangerously inclined to lashon hara, the evil tongue. But I needs keep it quiet, put a good face on it, and play host to the evening's pilgrims. It is only a short while to sundown, so I slink off to the back kitchen to scarf down my last meal. I slump onto my wooden stool, a leaden statue, with one elbow on the table, as I consume the dessert du jour, a roasted egg rolled in ash, chased with a piece of stale bread and a gulp of water. Symbol of the destroyed temple, better ashes than curses in my mouth. For me the fast has begun, though sundown is still a little ways off. There are only 2 or 3 solitary souls in the dining-room at the time, each nursing his pint of mead, blissfully unaware of the presence of the others. Suddenly, I hear a distinctively Jewish-inflected voice call out, "What does a neshama have to do to get service in this place?" I poked my head into the dining-room, fearful for the safety of whoever is so guileless as to cry out in Sarfati dialect in Judenfrei, Paris, "Mon Dieu! It is my Uncle Levi, in full rabbinic regalia, sitting ramrod straight at a table in the midst of my house of trafe. I am horrified. I compose myself, drape a serviette over my left arm, and sashay over to his table as quickly as I can without arousing suspicion. "Monseigneur, to what do we owe the honor of a visit from such an estimable personage as yourself?" Followed sotto voce by, "What in Gehenna are you doing here, uncle? Do you have any idea how dangerous it is for you to be in Paris?" I look around nervously. As my eyes return to my uncle's visage, I am startled by how young and innocent he looks. Standing next to this giant of science, philosophy, and theology, I am suddenly aware of the prematurely aged kitchen scullion that I am, though nearly the same age as he, short a few years. My mother's baby brother, younger by nearly a score of years, the holy Ralbag himself, acronym for Rabbi Levi ben Gershon. With a twinkle in his eye, "Mon fils, not to worry. I am under the protection of the Pope as the court astronomer. I have come to ascertain the well-being of my favorite nephew. Bon? And now I would like a glass of your best aquavit." to which he adds, sotto voce, "and perhaps a bit of beef tongue from your so-called second kitchen if it were to be had." I smile, undoubtedly dyspeptic smile, kiss my uncle on the hand, and excuse myself to the kitchen. Once inside, I collapse against the door in a pool of sweat. My uncle, genius that he is clearly out of touch with the mortal threat of being identified as a Jew in defiance of the expulsion decree from the city of Paris. I compose myself and set the second kitchen to work on my uncle's delicate request. Mop brow, plaster smile on face, and stride out to Rav Levi, every footfall echoing in my ears. I balance his glass of aquavit and a platter of beef tongue. In my brief absence, a small crowd has wandered into La Huichette and taken up battle stations at a few tables scattered throughout the room. "God be with you, gentlemen. What is your pleasure here?" I scurry from table to table, offering the customary greeting. The first table I accost is peopled by an odd threesome. The one in charge bears the mien and attire of a high-status Eastern monk. He is in the company of a large, scowling Mongol in Persian costume and an Italian banker. The monk mutters to the banker and vice versa. Rising before the smiling monk, the banker turns and gestures to the whole room. "His Eminence Rabban Marcus would like to offer a toast to his former teacher, Rabban Bar Soma, who once patronized this very house 20 years ago, when he was the guest of your king for an entire month. Gentlemen, to the joint futures of the Western and Eastern Church and the defeat of the Mamluk tyrant. Please, everyone, give everyone another glass of whatever they are drinking." Rabban Marcos bobbles his hoary head, smiles expansively, and lifts his glass to the assembled multitude. The crowd that has gathered by then goggles its approval. My mother had been running the inn when she met this man's mentor, Bar Salma, a remarkable world traveler. He'd left her a copy of his expansively titled memoir, The History of the Life and Travels of Rabban Salma, Envoy and Plenipotentiary of the Mongol Khans to the Kings of Europe, and Marcos, who, as Mar Yaba Allah III, became Patriarch of the Church of the East in Asia. How I was transfixed by those exotic tales, translated into the French by Maman. So this Eastern monk Marcos is Mar Yab Allah III, the Patriarch of the Eastern Church. By now, at the time of the redemption from which I pen this tale, I know as well as anyone that His Eminence fails in his unifying mission. Humanity's inability to play well with others continues to the bitter end. So it was in the end, just before the redemption occurs, when the AIs conclude that the cost-benefit ratio for maintaining the last human colony on Earth is rapidly shifting into the debit column. The streets of the megalopolitan smart island, Leviathan, devolve into petty but violent squabbles among all the religious and ideological microfactions, held in check only by Zizcorp's vigilance and Behemoth's re-education program. But in La Huichette, as my uncle drinks his aquavitae in the company of these illustrious Christians, I simply marvel at the mix of humanity pouring into my humble establishment. The Mongol, it turns out, represents the Persian ilkhanate, home to sophisticated academies of astronomy and mathematics that my uncle would no doubt admire. The ilkhanate is looking for an alliance against the Mamluks as well. In spite of the fact that their Turkic rulers are co-religionists with the ilkhanate's Muslims, he knows them to be the descendants of slaves, unfit for world domination. Before I have time to complete the ingathering of my thoughts, along with my breath, I am forthwith assailed by yet another member of the Italian laity at an adjoining table. "Mio uomo, enough of those inflated papists. can an honest, free-thinking intellectual get something to eat and drink here? I snap my gaze in the direction of the voice and confront the severe, pale visage of an Italian nobleman. Marsilius of Padua, at your service. Don't look so shocked, young man. I am a physician, and can tell you with certainty a surfeit of friars may be fatal to one's health. He smiles sagely at his companions, who smile back with forced mirth. Why, your fair King Philip surely agrees with me on the necessity of limiting papal power and accruing it to the secular authority. The affairs of state and the affairs of men are rightfully the jurisdiction of the crown. We'll happily yield the study of the soul and such metaphysical trivialities to the churchmen, no? Marsilius, rather pleased with himself, folds both hands on the table in front of him as if to beckon further audience. I bow from the waist. And what will Monseigneur le Padovan have to eat, if I may ask? He eyes me with more than a little condescension. A tripe, the Florentine way. Do you have it? I bow curtly and reply, we pride ourselves on the variety of our cuisine. Florence produces no shortage of tripe, of which we may avail ourselves, unless the gentleman prefers the Padovan variety. I smile blandly. As for the rest of you, gentlemen, I gesture to his sycophantic table companions, but Marsilius interrupts. Ha! Good one, my tonsured friend. We are of one mind, that is to say, mind. Let there be tripe on every tongue in this city of clerics, and do be quick about it. The Padovan sits back, tickled with his own cleverness. I've already turned my heel with a curt nod, both irritated and amused, when I spy a table of 3 young rakes, taunting an older scholar who is clearly holding his own. Curious about their riotous, inebriated discourse, I sidle a bit closer to the entertainment. Master Philippe Vitry, Buridanus, the most raucous of the 3 rakes, shouts, I toast you very like a window, un vitre, onto the musical landscape of our age. I drink to the radical wonder of Ars Nova, and to your health as long as the good Lord may let you fog the mirror. He raises his pint of mead to the distinguished young composer of experimental music. And verily, and forsooth, you are an Ars Nova, the horse's cousin, snorts Murus, the dandy at Vitry's other elbow, to Buridanus. A most intolerable pun on young musical genius's town of origin. Vitry, Vitre, comprend? Most rich, don't you think? Or do you find it too vitriolic? Whoa, I say, did you catch it? My hoary liege, Monsieur Jacobus of Liège. He mused with exaggerated deference to the elder of the 2 composers. Vitre, for Vitry, he. Good one, Johannes, he perseverates, a steady drool of mead running down his chin. Buridanus, incomparable mead-fueled hilarity, takes up the gauntlet of inanity. And your unctuous, my liege, he sniggers as he stumbles to his feet, to offer a dramatic bow and flourish. A capital jest on our elder's birthplace, our most modest and abstemious critic, defender of Ars Antiqua. Our ancient liege from Liège. An explosion of drunken guffaws. The more senior and sober musical theorist, Jacob of Liège, carefully places his pint on the table, folds his hands around the flagon, and looks with pursed lips and dramatic disapprobation upon his juniors. Momentarily silenced, they attend him with bloodshot eyes. I, in sound and sober state, merely rest in counterpoise to your irreverent and corrupt music, with my modest silence. Et as antiqua regnabit in saecula saecularum. As antiqua shall reign long after your abominations turn to ash. I demur to you, Johannes demurreth, in all matters brute, licentious, and spurious. Silence. About to skulk back into the kitchen to perpetuate the illusion that there is actually a staff at work in there with whom I must have congress, my eye fixes itself upon a singularly striking German Dominican with a kindly, albeit ethereal, mien. He is seated with, of all people, William of Paris, Inquisitor of France, nemesis of Templars and Jews. The German smiles most pleasantly as he catches my eye. The Inquisitor interposes himself and motions me near. My friend Eckhart inhabits realms other than that in which you and I consort. I'm afraid I must order victuals for the both of us. Rabbit stew and a couple of meads will do nicely. It is then that I notice the plush grey fur that poofs out from his collar and sleeves. A pair of rabbits for the fox's lunch. The influence of the vulpine Inquisitor rivals the authority of foul King Philip. Post haste, your eminence, as I bow and make to scurry off. But when I spin to go, I am confronted by the sight of an elderly Spanish medical man stooped at my uncle's table. What else might my guileless uncle say? I rush over to Uncle Levy's elbow in a few quick bounds to intervene. As I arrive, I hear the Spaniard exhorting, Aqua vitae, I highly approve. It prolongs good health, dissipates superfluous humours, reanimates the heart, and maintains youth. I breathe a sigh of relief. Just another blowhard. I give him a wry smile. Monsieur le médecin, qu'est-ce que voulez-vous? What will you have? He raises his furry brows at me and exclaims, Why, surely an aqua vitae to keep company with this extraordinarily learned scholar. With that, he plops himself down at my uncle's table. He sees me staring at him in a state of some small alarm. Young man, I am a doctor, Arnaldus of Villanova. What ails you? I shake off my momentary cataplexy and assure him, Monsieur le médecin, I am quite well. Nothing a little aquavitae couldn't remedy. My uncle then turns to Arnaldus with a droll smile and pats me on the back. He has the aspect of one altogether too prone to worry. A melancholic, not a bad trait in an educated servant, but doomed to foreshorten one's life. Arnaldus claps my uncle on the shoulder. Well said! But then again, the end is nigh, a scant 69 years off by my calculation, the whole blasted planet. Hoist one with us, my young fellow, to the end of time, when you are done slopping the rest of these hogs. He indicates the other denizens of the establishment. My uncle, usually the soul of discretion, bursts into belly laughs, and the old geezer whinnies in counterpoint. At last I fall back into the kitchen and clutch my chest to stifle my nascent cardiac arrhythmia. The first round of orders is already underway. Tanta Hannah taught me well. Hanging back to create a judicious delay, I grab the waiting tray of drinks and dash out for another sortie. As soon as I enter the room, I spot two newcomers, a querulous young Brit and tonsure, and an old coot of a Spanish Franciscan, both vying for the last free table in the room. I speed over to them with my tray of drinks to ease the awkwardness of the situation. Gentlemen, I smile at the two, may I suggest that in honor of the conviviality of the evening, you introduce yourselves to one another and discover the first-rate dinner companion you have just met. I shall happily fetch you the beverage of your choice and leave you time to contemplate the delights of the palate of which you may avail yourselves. Without moving a facial muscle, the young Brit observes dourly, This is the last available table in the room. The both of us wish to dine here. Therefore, we must perforce sit together. He gingerly places his fingers on the back of the chair before him. The ancient Spaniard raises an eyebrow as he makes to squat as well. And what do you call yourself, my eminently logical young pup? The Brit tilts his head ever so slightly, without actually making eye contact. William. Long pause. Of Ockham. His elder extends a hand, which he must let drop for want of reciprocation, but powers on. A fellow Franciscan, Ramon Lul, also known as Dr. Illuminatus, a name conferred by one of your countrymen, the estimable Duns Scotus. He collapses into the chair and emits a loud onomatopoetic harumph. And what brings you to this side of the channel, my callow Englishman? Young Ockham takes a seat, states flatly, Last trip abroad before I matriculate at Oxford for my master's. The old man waxes a bit morose. You're fortunate to have seen your way so clearly, so young. I, on the other hand, whilst still a young man and a seneschal to the King of Mallorca, was given to composing worthless songs and poems to doing other licentious things. A sigh of irredeemable regret escapes the old Spaniard's lips. But I threw off the entirety of my old worthless life, including my wife and children, and dedicated myself to the cause of heaven, the conversion of heathens. Bored, I glance for a moment back at the rakes table to see what progress they have made. I spy the elder Jacobus, with a look of exaggerated, smug self-satisfaction, quaff his mead and pat the corners of his mouth with his kerchief, while the others reload for the next volley of farce. Vitry, the celebrated young composer of the first toast, cannot hold back a cackle. Score one for the antique gentleman, demurring to the philosophe within our walls. Mirrus, the mirror! The genitive, I believe. Wall of what? Why, ignorance, no doubt. With a roar, they all down another pint. Then he turns to the youngest and most boisterous of the company, the newly minted Jesuit of fiery mien. Johannes Buridanus, you're no ignoramus. Foist your choice upon us, Ars Nova or Ars Equanimus. At that all four cry, Huzzah! Nod in agreement. A court of fools, clink flagons, and down another pint of mead. The young priest wipes his non-existent mustache, smiles at the others, and shakes his head in feigned moral quandary. Truly an ass between two feed troughs am I, so torn in my equal and opposing passions, I am unable to feed at either one. They all bray approval of the one salient thought wrung from their compatriots' otherwise soggy pate. I laugh as I pivot on my heel and hurry off. I count myself among the cognoscenti, recognizing the seed of Buridan's famed philosophical conjecture on the matter of impetus and the impossibility of choosing between two impulses of equal magnitude and opposite valence. As future scholars of cybernetics later realize, this is a problem for any intelligent system with no means of creating bias. The original statement of the halting problem, the problem that plagues the development of artificial intelligence until its solution in the 22nd century. But my faithful golem suffers from no such lack, the tilt of my intention propelling it to action whenever called upon. From the vantage of the redemption, I also know that the two Johanneses, Demurus and Buridanus, are bound for big trouble. The marvels of quantum universal integrated experiential temporality, the technology of the redemption. I have seen the former, an aloof and shiftless polymath, banished to Cyprus for the murder of a cleric. I witnessed the latter, a convicted Copernican and a womanizer, bound in a sack and thrown into the river Seine. Sic semper inebriotus. Speaking of inebriates, I returned to my two newest guests just in time to see Dr. Illuminatus lean close to his recalcitrant dinner companion, thus ensuring that he sprays the young scholar with a steady stream of spittle. In addition to forcing the Arabic tongue upon myself and attending the mystic Sufic rites, I learned from the Arab astrologers the abstruse science of their contraption, the Zaira. He raises the bushy set of caterpillars that wriggle over his eyebrows, his eyes, and continues in a stage whisper. They say it came down to them from ancient Enoch, known to the Jews as Metatron, chief of angels. A logic contraption for divining answers to all variety of questions by way of navigating a system of trees and circles, quite ingenious. I adapted it to my purpose of converting the heathen by setting it in a circle of assumptions acceptable to all the monotheistic faiths, which, by brutal logic, leads inexorably to the one true faith. Rubbing his hands together, he pronounces, with no small drama, I call it my ars magna. No more the conquest by sword, but by intellect alone. He pokes the air and returns his rheumy gaze to me. I say, young man, bring the two of us a flask of your best Catalan wine and 2 glasses that we might toast the conversion of the Jews. I fairly sprint to the kitchen and choke back the bile that rises in my gullet, silently loathing the old fool. His forced choice arse is not unlike the push-poles of the 21st century Machiavellian pundit Frank Luntz, the instrument of many a forced political so-called conversion. I take some comfort in the knowledge, looking back from the point of view of the redemption, that Dr. Illuminatus will go on a fool's mission to Tunis, from which he does not return alive. Dido's revenge. Seems he has given false information that the Sultan has an interest in his ars magna. Fixed his ars, indeed. Cause of death? Hubris. And his contraption, his ars magna, as I would dub one who his ars magna, as I would dub one who wields such a foul weapon, the predecessor of all such tainted tools of artificial intelligence, doomed to hoist its master on its own petard. But my job, as so wonderfully stated by Arnaldus, is to slop the hogs, not to argue with them. I explode back into the dining room with what no doubt is an insane grin plastered of necessity across my face, that I might deliver the goods to every table. When I reach the illuminator's table to deposit his undiluted intoxicant, the old Spaniard totters to his feet once again, this time to address the entire crowd. Conquistadors! We soldiers of faith must drink to our joint mission in this, our scholastic capital. With the power of a superior intellectual system, we may defeat the ignorant heathen with his own logic. I raise a glass of the finest Catalan wine, courtesy of the generous young friar, and invite you to join me in toasting the conversion of the Jew and the Saracen. The Mongol's perpetual scowl grows deeper, his hand edging toward the dagger at his hip. I do not like the look of the brew. Suddenly the old buffoon Arnaldus hoists himself from his chair, mayhaps a source of comic relief. Catalan wine, you say? Let's have some of that over here as well. I'll drink anything over that potent stuff. Only thing for which I'd set aside my noble aquavit. Unfortunately, the fatal exhortation has drawn the illuminator's gaze to my uncle's table. He sets one shrewd eye on Rav Levi, and immediately silences the room with his bellow. Monsignors, we have an adversary in our midst, seated next to my myopic compatriot, Arnaldus, a marvelous mind for doctoring the body, but dubious taste in friends. Suddenly, all eyes are upon my poor ingenious uncle. Illuminatus turns one jaundiced eye on Rav Levi. And who, my dear sir, might you be? Still seated, staring intently into his untouched wine-glass, Rav Levi states crispy, Levi ben Gershon, astronomer to the Pope at Avignon. Then gazing with a disarming grin at his interrogator, at your service. My God, I think to myself, this is going to its ill-starred conclusion faster than shite through a mead-soaked mendicant. I can hear the gears clicking and whirring in Fra Lul's arse. But before he can let fly another gaseous explosion, William the Inquisitor leaps in. I say, by all that is holy, I swear that man with Arnaldus is a Jew. At which point, Marsilius, a few pints of mead in his belly, shoots back, Hold your fatuous papist. This is a matter for the king, as it is he who 3 years ago to this day declared the ban, not the clergy. We should send a friar here to summon the night watch, if it is the law that compels you. His eyes dare the Inquisitor to disagree. Let them determine whether or not this man is guilty of criminal trespass. If it is of souls that you inquire, then rest assured that your trespasses have not gone unnoticed by the Almighty. Look to yourself, O fox in the sheepfold. With that, Marsilius simply returns to his drink. The Inquisitor blanches at such bald impertinence in his sphere. Rather than risk further embarrassment, he turns to his table-mate for support. My dear, most temperate Meister Eckhart, what do you see in Jan Levi ben Gershon's mien? Surely an occult threat to French Christendom. No? His companion stares dreamily in my uncle's direction, and speaks as one might discourse with angelic beings. The eye through which I see Levi ben Gershon is the same eye through which I see God, and through which God and Levi ben Gershon see me. My eye and God's eye and Levi's eye are one eye, one seeing, one knowing, one love. The silence is deafening. I stand frozen to the spot. As soon as I gather my wits sufficiently, I begin to inch toward the kitchen to fetch Tante Hannah's Huichette. Surely, if there ever was a time to recruit the aid of the golden trumpet, this is it. But just as my fingers reach to crack open the door, who should pipe up but the pipsqueak headed for Oxford, that human clamshell, William, of Ockham. Ahem, he stammers as he rises from his seat. On the matter of Pope versus King, upon much study, I declare them separate but equal. On the matter of Arnaldus's companion, I much vouchsafe. The man wears the clothes of a Jew, bears the name of a Jew, and verily hath the face of a Jew. Q.E.D., the man is a Jew. As to the existence of the general case of the Jew, I defer to my worthy opponent, Burleigh, standing at yon table. A rather large, bearded and inebriated cleric nods from the other side of the room. With a conclusive set of the jaw, the young scholar makes to resume his seat. But upon the instant, the Persian Mongol, having had his fill of pietistic claptrap, unsheathes his dagger and sends it sailing toward the clueless future Oxonian. It grazes the young scholar's face as neatly as any barber's tool. In the muddled recollection of the evening's badinage, the Mongol's rejoinder is henceforth known as Occam's close shave, or alternatively, Occam's razor. Pandemonium ensues. As I dive for the trumpet, out of the corner of my eye I see a posse of Dominicans of evil aspect converging on Arnaldus. The Mongol and the Italian banker kick over their table and deploy it as a siege tower to shelter the Spanish doctor while advancing on the foe. The Eastern patriarch alternately wrings his hands and cheers his comrades. Mead, mugs, and mutton legs fly freely through the air. Cries of "Heretic!" and "Blasphemer!" crisscross the room. William of Paris advances and slaps Marsilius on the cheek. The latter's Padovan companions pinion the Inquisitor against the wall all four limbs espaliered to the max. The defender of the peace, as Marsilius loudly proclaims himself, grabs a bench for a battering ram and aims straight for William. The intervention of Ramon's leather-bound arse aims smartly at Marsilius' shins, launches the Italian face first into the Inquisitor's pudendum. The two adversaries crumple under a mound of flailing friars. Augustinians, Carmelites, Franciscans, Dominicans, even a stray Jesuit, all jumble in the mix. Only Eckhart and Levi sit unmoved in their seats, observing the melee as if attending a mummers' play. Standing in the doorway to the kitchen, I place the trumpet to my lips and blow with the most focused intention I can muster. Every item in the room stops, frozen mid-trajectory. Even the spittle flying from Ramon's beard, as well as the projectile vomitus coaxed from the Inquisitor's lips. A tableau of moralistic inanity writ large burns in my memory of that eve of destruction. Then the chairs and benches start to move about the room of their own accord, collecting the rump ends of all the combatants. As my grandfather would say in his obscure Tsarfati dialect, "Abi a chair, abi a tarhas." For every seat, a hindquarter. The brooms and dustbins leap to the ready. Each zombie pugilist sits astoned, cleaned of the ravages of the battle, astride his faithful stool. At my signal, well after the town is fast asleep, a caravan of somnambulous squabblers floats ghost-like through the byways and alleys, each reveller transported to his own bed, perchance to dream, but certainly not to remember the night's carnage. I look forward to the purgation of the ensuing day's fast. Only Eckhart and Levi will recollect the evening's mayhem. At the time of the redemption, it will be a point of communion for the two gentle souls, from irony to bliss, and miles to go in between. Rav Krishna closes the time-worn tome, touches it briefly to his lips, nestles it to his chest, shuts his eyes and rocks back and forth on his heels in silence. Outside the visitors' lounge, the first intimations of dawn pierce the still dark eastern sky. Eyes sealed, he distills a tune that sublimes gradually from the depths of his kishkis, the well of his innermost, ripples through the diaphragm, and condenses in both lungs until it burbles out lips and tongue. As the words come spilling out, his eyes flutter open, and he nods in rhythm. A sympathetic wave of head-bobbing propagates across the sea of bodies in the room. Keli ata ve'odecha Elokai aromemecha Keli ata ve'odecha Elokai aromemecha Hodu l'Adonai ki tov ki olam chasdo Hodu l'Adonai ki tov ki le'olam chasdo. Over and over, the haunting minor mode nigun. The founder of the Rav's dynasty, the Baal Hatanya, had first put the bit of soul to paper 3 centuries earlier. Gratitude, the breath of life, unbounded kindness. Every element in the room buzzing in harmony. Swirling eddies of improvisational scat and the spirit of optimism, sweet and relentless. As the tune damps down to a smattering of mumbled ay-ay-ay's, the Rav calls upon his well-wishers, his roomful of chevrusas, serious study partners to a one, to attend his concluding word. Chevra, he smiles. One crazy book, new? Heads nod, exhausted but strangely sated. Don't think about it too much. Just take it in. Let it sit in your kishkis for a little while before you even try to say anything about it. You have all been the greatest of blessings to Sita and me this night of learning and camaraderie. And most of all, I believe we have loaded up our baby boy with your abundance of spirit. May he ride the crest of our love into the uncertain times to come. And may he cultivate that spirit in the service of beleaguered humanity's future. A somnambulant chorus of Amen, Amen, with the downing of the last of the Boyd and Blair.